Welcome to our webinar today, Employing Cutting-Edge Technologies to Modernize Regulatory Agencies. So we are going to be doing a 30-minute presentation today, and then we will have a live Q&A afterwards for anyone who wishes to stay on. You can also add questions in the Q&A as we go along, and then we'll address those at the very end. So who are we to get started with? My name is Taylor Becerra. I am a principal consultant at Counterpoint Consulting, and we are an OpenText partner, which means that while OpenText actually produces the software that we use, Counterpoint comes in and implements the different software products into the full solution for the client. And then my co-presenter here is Keith, and I'm gonna move it over so you can say hi.
Hi, everybody. Keith Nelson with OpenText. I'm the senior strategist for industry marketing of global public sector. And Taylor and I are here in the Washington, D.C. area because we're both very public sector minded. And the great thing, like Taylor mentioned, OpenText is really expert at our software, and we can talk about all these use cases and all the functionality and features that we have. But it's wonderful when you find a partner like Counterpoint who really knows intimately the customer technology environment. So when you have somebody who knows the customer environment and somebody who knows the software, and you put them together, you have a real powerful connection. So happy to be here today.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to go on to our next slide here. So I'm going to give you guys some background on how this webinar came to be as we kick off here. So Counterpoint was called into a state financial regulatory agency back in 2019 to modernize and unify the system using OpenText products, unify their current systems. I am going to be keeping the client anonymous during this webinar, so I'm going to be referring to them as the Banking and Securities Department or just the department. So I was the project manager for that solution, and we successfully went live in 2021. And then after we went live, OpenText came in and wrote a success story highlighting the specific issues that were facing this regulatory agency. We have successfully implemented solutions for a good number of regulatory agencies, not just this one, but we tend to see a lot of the same issues popping up for all of these agencies. So on top of the daily rulemaking, oversight, and enforcement tasks that you have to do, you also have to adapt to the increasingly digital nature of the current world and that's currently becoming the norm for how everything is handled. You also tend to face a lot of disjointed and inefficient information routing, general lack of transparency, and low efficiency because you have these outdated and isolated tools. So we wanted to put together this webinar to give an actual example of how a large regulatory agency took that leap to modernize their system. During this webinar, I'm going to walk through first a high-level summary of the issues that the Banking and Securities Department faced, the process we took to implement the solution, and then walk through a specific example of a process that was improved significantly as a part of this solution with the modernization effort. Then I will hand it over to Keith, who will do a deeper dive into the actual products that we used for the solution. So while OpenText has a large stack of tools available, we focused on the case management and workflow aspects of AppWorks, the document management of Content Server, and then the reporting of Magellan. So those will be the three items that Keith will go through in a little more detail later. On this slide, you will see a link to that success story that I mentioned. When we send these slides out afterwards, you'll be able to click on it and access the success story from there. So while I could talk about the overall improvements you can achieve with a modernization effort like this all day, I wanted to highlight some of the most common goals that we see regulatory agencies striving for generally. So the first is to cut down on expenses, and this is done through application unification and a lean technical management team. By having a single centralized system that are comprised of tools that are meant to work together, it really cuts back on the downtime, reduces the number of developers that are needed to make updates to the system, and the number of administrators that you need to maintain it in the future as well. The second item is to improve efficiency and transparency in data analysis and reviews. This includes incorporating workflows, dashboards, reports, all of that to route decisions to the appropriate place, along with the data that you need to be able to make your decisions. And then the last item is to increase public confidence in the regulatory agency through a clarity of decision-making and the review process. And this can be done in a few ways. You have improved review timelines, you have a more formal, structured process rather than using email, snail mail, or even in some cases, we still see fax. And then instead of that, you have this external portal that you can provide information, documents to the appropriate individuals who have the appropriate access. And we'll get into that more in a few minutes. So I do want to give you some backgrounds on the Banking and Securities Department. Just under 10 years ago, the department had undergone a major organizational structural change. And they ended up with multiple case management systems that they used to enter and track data across their agencies. Then they hired a company to come in and take just the first step in the modernization process, not a full comprehensive modernization, but they just wanted to consolidate their existing systems into one single system. Unfortunately, the effort was unsuccessful. There were challenges with business requirements, delays, budget overruns, and the project was eventually shelved. So a few years later, the department decided to go the full modernization route, not just unification consolidation. And they wanted to address these major pain points that you can see on our slide. So the first major pain point that the agency wanted to address was a disjointed and inefficient information routing due to the use of isolated platforms. So at this point, the department had a combination of both paper and digital data across numerous tools and platforms that didn't communicate with each other at all. They were viewing data on either a screen or sometimes even a piece of paper, typing it into another, having different windows up, trying to juggle everything just so that they could see the information they needed for whatever they were working on. It was frustrating, it was time consuming, it was generally hard to work with. I know a lot of people tend to experience this, and it can be very annoying to get your daily work done. The second item that the agency was dealing with was the lack of transparency at all levels, management, administration, and regulatory submitters. So the department was receiving license submissions from the general public, but then these submissions would go into a black hole. If a department manager wanted to see the status of a review, they would have to pick up the phone and call whoever was doing the review or handling the case. If a submitter wanted to find out what was going on with their application, what the status was, they would have to personally call or email the department and request an update. These communications take time to address. They clog up the daily workload. And then at the administrative level, even above that, in order to see reports on this data and track where everything is, it was a process of coordinating with other department users, collecting all of that information, and then compiling it manually into Excel files. So a lot of different steps just to kind of get a bird's eye view. And then the last major pain point that the department wanted to address was the low efficiency in timelines because of these paperwork and email clogs. Along with that, it was manual data manipulation, human error, duplication of work tasks. All of that adds up. When the department was processing thousands of applications annually without a streamlined tool to handle that flow of data, emails are going to get lost, papers are going to get misplaced, someone can type something in wrong. There's just a bunch of different ways that things can go wrong. So we've been through the department's major pain points and their overall goals in the modernization effort, but how did we actually accomplish that? How did we go live with a successful tool? This is where Counterpoint and OpenText came in, and we had a nice solid strategy to resolve all of these department issues. So I'm going to go through, I basically categorized it into six different solutions. The first aspect of the solution was to consolidate all of those systems into one unified, easy to navigate internal tool, and this includes third-party integrations. And so this was that first step in the modernization effort that the department took prior to Counterpoint and OpenText coming on board. So the point here was that you don't have to have 6 different browser bookmarks in order to view all of the information. It's all in one location, and then everything we develop is custom. So we were able to build out dashboards and pages to show exactly what each role in the system or each role in the department needed to see in the system. So each dashboard is customized, and you're able to view exactly what you need. The second aspect of the solution was we incorporated a self-service external portal for applicants to submit information and documents that would then transfer to the internal workflow. This aspect of the solution was accomplished with the AppWorks software tool. I just want to put a name to it, so when we come back at the end, you have that in your mind. With the external user portal, the department could then send these submissions for rework to an external submitter for more information, request documents, add comments. They could even send it to other reviewers internally if they needed to have other department workers review the submission. And then because all of that data is stored in one single location, the internal users would complete their review, and then all of the data from those submissions is available immediately on any of the dashboards or reports that we set up. Bringing the external users in to the modernization effort was a significant step for the department. The external users, the general public, now had more control. They had insight into what was happening with their submissions. They could submit questions. They could submit documents to the department just to assist them with their applications, with anything that they were working on. And then everything they did is tracked in the system and shown in audit logs. We have a full history of everything. We also added a convenient online payments tool as a part of the application process, so the external users could submit payments within the tool itself. And the feedback from the external users has just been overwhelmingly positive, particularly with the full application process and being able to make payments as a part of the comprehensive solution. The third aspect of the solution was implementation of a document management system using OpenText content server tool. And we use this to link data and documents and provide a simple security framework and access for these documents. So if a department user wanted to access the documents for a particular entity that exists within the system, we had a link on the entity dashboard that would go straight to all of the documents, all of the folders that are associated with that entity. We also built out automatic document generation as a part of workflow, but also ad hoc in the solution. So you can create documents, you can share them with the specified individuals without having to use templates, download a template, make changes, upload it, distribute it manually. The system would automatically do that. And then the last thing that was included in the document management solution that I really want to highlight here is record retention. So in cases where data needed to be purged from the system, and the department had very strict data purging rules, after a certain amount of time or a certain amount of non-use time, depending on the situation, we would set that up so that these documents would be purged automatically. Users wouldn't have to go in and automatically delete things or manually delete things just because of record retention. The next solution that we implemented was role-based security. And this is for access to data, documents, reports, tasks, literally everything within the system. So what this means is that users only see what is meant for them based on their role or roles that are outlined within the system. So for example, only certain roles would have the ability to create a new entity within the system or initiate certain workflows. The next solution was a data reporting tool using the Magellan software, which again, Keith will get to. And this allowed the users to view summary and detailed reports. And this was a big part of the solution for the department. One of the really cool things about this reporting tool is that once you set up the data, once the developers have everything all set, regular users can make changes to those reports. So if, for example, the department got a call from another agency, another regulatory agency asking for specific information, asking for a report, they can just go in and add a column to a report or even create an entirely new report without having to call a developer. So it speeds that process up and they have the tools to do it themselves. And then the last solution I wanted to highlight was a lean development team. We enabled the department developers to maintain and modify the system as needed for the future, rather than forcing them to rely on Counterpoint to make those updates. We were able to use this lean development team because they were trained on a unified platform, all of these OpenText products, and then they could manage the system after we went live, and they are. So I do want to walk through an example. I know it's fun to talk about, you know, high-level solutions and everything, but I think it's important for you to see just a quick example of the before and after for one of the processes and how the department was handling this full workflow, which is called entity examinations. So I'm going to give you the short version, even though it is 10 steps. But every year, the department would first run an analysis of all of the entities within the system. And they would order the entities by the time since their last examination, and then select the top X% of examinations to run this year. And it's just to make sure that the entity is in compliance. So that's step one right there. The department would then select which examiners would be responsible for performing the exam, step two. And then they would manually put together all of the letters and documents that outline the exam process for the entity, so they would know what to expect, which is step three. Then there would be some back and forth between the entity and the department, asking questions, getting more information. And then the entity would put together some pre-exam documents and they would submit them, and the actual exam would then happen. And those are steps 4 and 5. After the exam, the examiner would go in, write up, share their information, log into a separate system to bill their hours and expenses that were associated with that exam. And then the billing department would create an invoice manually for that exam to send it out. So that is 7 and 8, creating the bill and sending it out. The entity would send back their check or other payment information. The department would file that payment manually, say, yes, we received this payment for the entity. And then the exam would finally be considered closed. So it's a nice long 10-step process with a lot of manual aspects to this. So we actually simplified this process significantly. You see all of our little icons here. Those are automation icons. So we built an exam assignment framework that would kick off on the specified date every year and automatically initiate and assign the examiners to the appropriate entities. So that's steps 1 and 2. They're automated now. Then the workflow would auto-generate the necessary documentation using pre-designed templates and data that was already input into the system, either by the external submitter originally or by managers within the system. And then it would send them to the entity through that external portal. So step 3 is also automated. So the first time that there's anything that's actually manually done is for the entity, where they can log in, submit any information and documents, and then those flow into the internal examiner that was assigned by the system. The examiner then completes the exam and writes up their report in the system, and then all of that information is going to be available for other users with the necessary roles automatically. There's no manual sharing that needs to happen. The examiner will then log their hours in the same system. And that's what's really neat about this is step 7, they're not having to go to another system to log their hours. It's done in the same system that we built. And then once they confirm that all of those hours and expenses have been logged, the system automatically generates an invoice. We had an invoice template, automatically generated it and sent it out to the entity through that external portal. Then the entity can submit their payment through the portal using that convenient online tool. And the system then verifies the payment, again, automatically because it's coming through the system, and can update the exam status to closed automatically. So when you take a step back and you look at this workflow now, we've automated half of the user tasks. We can let technology handle the busy work in situations where we can utilize business rules and get those set up. And this gives the department more time to focus on the tasks that need human intelligence and human interaction. For the tasks that are left here, you can see that we've actually simplified the interactions between them as well. Everything has now been brought into a single system. We're not waiting for paper mail to come in. We're not waiting for packages to be overnighted to the department. And the entire history of everything, like I mentioned earlier, is tracked in an audit log. So you can see who completed everything, when they completed it, and just follow that through. And this is, again, I want to reiterate, just one of the processes for the Banking and Securities Department. We did this for all of their different processes and were able to automate a significant amount of the work, the busy work that they were having to do. So overall, the project was and continues to be an overwhelming success for the agency. The department actually recently released a statement shortly after going live, touting the improvements in everything that they were doing: efficiency, security protections, realized cost savings, environmental sustainability, cutting down on paper, and the convenient online payments were a big step for them. Since going live, the department has continued to roll out new features, new updates on a regular basis using their main development team. So if you can take away one thing from this webinar, it is that you do not have to continue doing things the way you've been doing them for the last 30 years. there's technical solutions out there that can drastically improve your day-to-day functioning. They can bring you into the age of digitization in a reasonable time frame. And this project is absolute proof that it can be done. I hope you also got some ideas for some of the different solutions you can implement or what is actually out there for you. I want you to not get stuck in the, well, this is how it's always been done, when you could be saying this is how things should be done. That is our goal here. So if you have any questions or want to talk more about the solution that Counterpoint implemented here or with any other of our regulatory agencies, please feel free to reach out. For all the attendees, we are going to be sending out these slides after we're done, and they have our contact information on the last slide, so you can reach out. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Keith here to dig a little deeper into the technologies that we use for this project. And then after that, we will have the Q&A.
Thanks, Taylor. And I heard some great takeaways from that. Number one, this is a great example of customer experience, citizen experience. And we see a lot of government agencies going down that road and understanding that there's better ways to do this. And they're hearing from their, those submitters, in this case, saying, can't we get this thing a little more transparent and speed things up? I also kind of heard the employee experience issue, where those employees were struggling with toggling around with different browsers and paper-based, and I'm sure they were, very grateful to not have to go that route again. And finally, I heard project manager, and Taylor, hats off to you. I know that encompasses a lot, living, sleeping, breathing with that project until it's off the ground. But I wanted to go about talking about some of the products that were referenced and talk a little more about those. And first of all, on the left, what is AppWorks? And this is OpenText low-code platform that's designed around process automation and dynamic case management. And the main benefits of AppWorks are flexibility and ability to adapt to changing conditions and organizational needs. You heard the Counterpoint kind of armed the in-house development team with the ability to kind of make their own changes. And that's because AppWorks is kind of built for kind of ease of flexibility and changes along those lines. It is information-driven design, streamlined, intuitive user experiences, and an ability to integrate with other systems. It does work well for mobile or desktop devices, and it can incorporate AI. Generally speaking, it doesn't take very long to become certified and ready to program on the AppWorks platform. Generally, it's easier to find developers on that and to retain them, and just less technical requirements to get going on that. This platform does have a pre-built government-ready case management workflow, where Counterpoint had a head start to build a system that met the requirements of this department. Yeah, it was custom built, but they didn't have to start from scratch, and that's because we have some things currently in-house to get things going. It is not just a government software system. It's also heavily used in the commercial sector. And in this case, with financial services and banking organizations, many of them use AppWorks in their IT environments. And for those who are familiar with the software world, there really is an advantage to having systems share data and communicate with each other using a common set of technologies. The second item mentioned was Content Server. And Content Server is OpenText's most popular product used in the public sector by far. Some of our customers use enterprise content management, some have used Documentum, but either way, the rationale for public sector customers to use these Content Server products is because they work almost like digital glue. We have an extended ECM for government product, where our software grabs content from, for example, a stray email, or maybe a message on Microsoft Teams, and it can attach it to a case file that's housed in an existing system, like could be Salesforce, ServiceNow, SAP, something custom. And the amount of time saved by having this content management backend is impressive. I did see a study recently that estimated there is 21% of daily productivity loss attributed to content-related issues. And to me, what comes to mind is government employees spend time saying, I know I saw that somewhere, but I'm not sure if it was in this system or that one, or maybe an email, maybe a paper file. And so searching through file after file, looking for that piece of content is a total waste of time. If you have a system like this, it reduces that enormously. The last product we're talking about is Magellan. And this is OpenText brand name for our artificial intelligence platform. There are many public sector use cases for Magellan outside of what you heard about here. For example, we can use Magellan to transcribe voice to text or chatbot discussions in order to instantly identify citizen sentiment and behavior. That way, the supervisor could intervene if there's an upset citizen calling into a contact center. We also use Magellan product to identify risky content, like documents with Social Security information or personally identifiable information that should require certain security permissions, like Taylor mentioned. Or it could even flag if government staff are using their computers to improperly access inappropriate content. We also use Magellan, or customers use Magellan, to capture unstructured content, like video or photo images, and organize it into useful categories or tag it so it can easily be found. Magellan is used in e-discovery and forensic investigations and for automating massive numbers of documents. It can be useful for data visualization, big data analytics, and text analytics. And so with that, I turn it back over to Taylor.
There we go. So thank you to Keith. And now we are going to open for Q&A. So I believe Gretchen is going to be moderating us here. Gretchen, did you receive any questions?
I don't have any questions this time, but just to remind everybody, you should see an icon, a question mark inside a little chat bubble. You can put your questions there. You can also put them into the regular chat, and we'll be happy to take those and get your questions answered.
Absolutely. And then if you do have any questions afterwards as well, our next slide does have our contact information on it, so you can always just reach out. We can put you in touch with the individual that can answer your question. So.
Just wait here a moment to see if we have any questions. It's always people, someone's always nervous to be the first one, but
Keith, do you have a question?
I do have a question.
Here, why don't you join me on here?
I have a question because I, would love to be a fly on the wall when you were there and engaging with the employees. Were they skeptical when you first arrived about how real this could be, and maybe they've all heard it before and it's never going to work, right?
Well, especially in a situation with the department, where they had already tried once before to take the first step in the modernization efforts. They were extremely skeptical, extremely concerned about what was going to happen and having to change how they did everything. And in fact, in some situations, we get regulatory agencies who say, can we make exactly the same thing that we currently have? And it does take some time. It takes time to get them on board. The way that Counterpoint develops, we like to do kind of a hybrid agile waterfall. So we're able to get the functionality to them earlier in the process. They can start to play around with it. And once they see how easy it is to navigate the different features that they have with content server and the document management, the drag and drop is something that everyone really latches onto. But once they actually get in and are able to start testing and see what things look like, it makes things a lot faster. And then requirements go a lot faster too once they realize what they can actually do. So, and it does look like we have received a question here from Chris. Can you discuss data volume and performance considerations? So from the development side of things, we typically work with whatever regulatory agency we are implementing to make sure that whatever hardware they have can handle what we are developing on our side of things. This includes document size, data size, and some of we've done everything from smaller systems to massive databases that have, you know, multiple databases that are interacting and working together. And we just make sure that the hardware that they have selected, we work with them to make sure that there's not going to be any issues with performance. I don't know if you have anything to add on the
I would just say,
side.
yeah, I mean, OpenText products are geared for the enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
So we do deal with the larger government. Well, any government agency is going to be significantly sized. Larger companies, you know, we've dealt with amazing amounts of volume in data processing. So this is kind of where our software sings, where there's high volumes and high performance requirements.
Absolutely. And just to give you an example, in the Magellan tool, the reporting that we did for this particular agency, the way it was set up is the data is pulled periodically so that you can access the data almost immediately. You're not sitting there waiting for things to load and return. In the back end, things are running so that you're able to access that information a lot faster, to the point where I think for this agency, we were talking to them about the performance. And they're like, well, we're used to a 3-minute load time. So I was like, it's going to take about 3 seconds. They're like, okay, we can handle that. So yes, there's a lot that goes into the performance considerations, but we're able to handle a significant amount of data. Any other questions?
Annie, we did have a question about how they'll be able to access the recording.
Absolutely. So as soon as we finish up with this webinar, Isabella is going to be sending out, or Counterpoint is going to be sending out the recording as well as the slides so you can access those, the link to the success story. I think it's a fantastic success story to check out, as well as our contact information. So you should receive an email shortly after the webinar. Awesome. And with that, I will take us to our contact information. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. Keith and I are both on there, so you can shoot us a message or ask us any questions there as well. So thank you everyone so much for joining us. I hope you guys got some new ideas, have some hope in what you can do in the future, and hope to talk to you soon. Thank you.
Bye.